Hi, my name is Katherine Connor.
And I'm Paul Holtz.
And we are writers for the T.C. Williams student newspaper, Theogony. We are here today to discuss the current climate at TC, including the discussions of the origins of and the repercussions and possible solutions to the fight culture at our school. We hope that the opinions of our students, climate specialists, and principal will provide us with greater understanding for the causes, effects, and solutions to conflict.
Okay, so why don't we introduce ourselves, David?
Okay.
My name,
Yep, you can start.
My name is David Iglesias. 10th grader.
My name is Peter Balas, principal of T.C. Williams.
My name is Greg Baldwin. I served as the school climate and culture specialist for Alexander City Public Schools.
My name is Calvin B. Ruff, and I'm currently a 12th grader at T.C. Williams.
And to start our first discussion, let's watch a video of the origins of fighting.
Fights at TC usually begin over beef on social media, or someone said something to someone else and they want to get him back, or something that's not smart to fight about.
Via social media, and then it just leaks into school. I think school is sort of the easiest place for it to occur.
People be talking about each other and starting rumors.
Like something on Twitter.
I think because there's like beef between them.
Because they got beef, they don't like each other. I think people talk about them behind their back and they want to square up.
Because I feel like they got beef with everybody. Like nobody got no chill.
I think that they think that that's the best way to solve their problems.
I think students fight at TC because there's a lot of competition between each other.
Every child thinks differently, so disagreements cause confusions.
I guess problems going on, probably after school, during school, drama.
They'll fight over anything, honestly. It's really petty.
Have you ever asked anyone involved in a fight how it started?
Yes, I have. And they would usually say, oh, this person said this to me on Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat or something on social media.
Yes. Yeah, and they normally say because that person had their name in their mouth or something along those lines.
No, I don't really like to involve myself into fights.
No.
No.
Nah.
No, I just watch.
No, I have not.
Okay, so from that video, we heard that a lot of the origins for fighting from students are so-called like beef and conflicts between students. One student said this, another student said that. David, what would you say the root causes are for fighting?
Well, as we saw, they said it all starts on social media.
Yeah.
Or they heard rumors from someone else, or other people are trying to act big in front of other kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Balas, what would you say you've seen some of the root causes are?
I would say some of the root causes I've seen for fighting here at TC are much like David referenced, either people trying to act one way in front of a student and try to challenge them pretty publicly, sometimes leaves the student feeling like they have no choice but to square up. And then I think also in social media, we see a lot of stuff going on in the neighborhoods or on social media that bleed into school. So when students arrive to school, they meet up from whatever drama was happening the day before and whatever drama was happening online, and that's where they meet.
Yeah, and it builds out of school and happens during school. That makes sense. Mr. Baldwin, what would you say you've seen in some of your restorative circles of the root causes?
I would say what has already been shared. I think it is an inability to engage in effective communication. When I served as Dean of Students, and I served in that role for 7 years, usually when there was a physical altercation, it was due to something that occurred on social media. And oftentimes the students had just taken a moment to just sit down and have a conversation,
Yeah,
they would be able to resolve it. Besides actually engaging in a physical altercation.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would you say the root causes are of fighting?
I think the root causes of fighting is basically trying to prove yourself to someone that you don't have to prove yourself to.
Mhm.
It's most times not to prove that it actually is beef. It's most times to prove that I'm not a sucker or that you can't try a person that actually has hard feelings or
Yeah.
hard emotions.
Yeah, so instead of being this like conflict, it's more of like having to prove yourself
Yes.
and be the dominant one.
Yes.
So called.
Okay, so what would you think what does fighting resolve more of, like, in this whole sense? If anyone can answer.
Fighting doesn't resolve anything. All it resolves is then someone seen as, oh, they're fighting, or even if you do lose, it just show that, oh, you're a loser in the school walls. So it doesn't resolve anything.
Yeah, I agree. There's no winner in fighting. When we look at, first off, what the research says, 1 out of 4 high school students actually report being in a physical altercation.
Oh, wow.
And what we also note, however, believe it or not, that there has been a decrease from 1991 when they started keeping the records, 43%, to 2015 at 23%.
Oh, wow.
So I do want to at least acknowledge that. I think that we're doing a better job collaboratively to try to decrease fighting. But there is no winner ever when we talk about fighting. And that's why I think it's so important that we continue to give students those skills they need to be able to resolve conflict, because conflict is a natural way of life. But we have to be able to give students the tools that they need to resolve them instead of them fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important. David, what would you say? Do you think that fighting resolves anything, or do you think there's any social aftermath between the students that engaged, or maybe in those social groups?
Well, in my opinion, once someone fights, and let's say we have the winner and loser, like they said, the person who's lost is gonna want to fight them again to show
absolutely.
that I maybe lost it the first time, but the second time I will.
Yeah, just like you were saying about the proving.
So,
would you say that there's ever any like resolution between the two people engaging? Like, have they ever been able to like connect again, or is it always conflict?
I mean, from what I've seen, well, people bring it from like back in the days, like since they started middle school. Beef started with each other. Then when it goes to 9th grade, since Hammond and GW goes together, they start beefing with Hammond kids.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then it brings it to TC, which you make your own little crew, and then it goes even bigger and bigger. So there's never end to it.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a new thing, but it's always been there and just continues to grow with greater populations.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mr. Balas, do you see any resolution with fighting?
I mean, on a positive note, when there have been times when students have engaged in a physical altercation, the opportunity we have after that to have the students sit down in a restorative conference to work out their issues and come to agreements and look at the causes of what happened, why it happened, and what the agreement is moving forward. They don't necessarily leave the best of friends, but at least with some sort of agreement about how we're going to conduct ourselves and some alternatives. So,
yeah, so it's not necessarily that there is resolution from the actual fight, but from the repercussions and solutions. Can Mr. Baldwin, Mr. Balas, can you talk a little bit more about the restorative circle process and what the steps are involved in that and the goals as well?
Sure, I would probably defer to my wonderful expert colleague.
Sure, I'll be glad to share. First of all, it's a tiered system. When we talk about a tiered system, tier 1 is community circles. And so, Mr. Balas has really been an advocate of restorative practices. And he's directed all of his teachers to have at least one community circle um, per term. And so what a community circle does, it actually builds relationships amongst the students as well as the teachers. And then that's universal. Everyone participates in that. But then when you have those students who need a little more, we have what are called then restorative circles. And those are the students who unfortunately have engaged in behavior that is not consistent with our Titan values. And then they actually meet with their administrator and all parties involved. Where I come in is I actually facilitated restorative conferences. And so let's say a student is unfortunately suspended for 3 days or more before they come back. They actually meet with me and all of the other stakeholders, whether it's students and teachers, whoever involved, and we bring in their parents. And we use that time to, again, bring both parties together, and we talk about, what happened. We talk about who was impacted, and how do we make things right? Where do we go from here? Which does allow both parties then, in most times, an opportunity for the first time to sit down and to have that conversation face to face outside of social media or second-hand information that they receive from other individuals, which ended up causing them to be in that fight.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds very effective. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Have either of you ever participated in a restorative circle or a restorative conference?
I was suspended before break, went to break, and I was supposed to have my meeting on Thursday, but since there was no school, they made it until Friday morning for me to come back from my parents.
Can you talk about, thank you for sharing. Can you talk a little bit about that process and whatever you're comfortable sharing and kind of what that was able to resolve?
I mean, Friday morning when I came with my father, I asked for Mr. Balas, but he wasn't around. So Mr. Gonzalez, he talked to me and my dad, and we talked about what happened and how it could be changed, and the other consequences that's gonna happen if it keeps occurring. So then I told Mr. Gonzalez that I'm not looking for any problems, it's done.
Of course.
And I was gonna get my school right because that's what I need to work on. And other than that, that's all. Everything was good.
So you would agree that the restorative circles are effective in teaching you those skills to resolve conflict in life?
Yeah, because you can find out from who was wrong, who was right, or both sides were wrong, and could have been a better way to resolve the problem instead of fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Baldwin, you talked a little bit about the skills, teaching students those skills to be able to resolve conflict. What would you say some of those specific skills are?
So first of all, I just want to say that, we take for granted that students know how to resolve conflicts. If a student can't read, we teach them how to read. If they can't write, we teach them how to write. But we also have to teach students how to deal with conflict. And I think one of the first things we have to do is we have to teach students how to communicate effectively, and unfortunately the social media era has really done us an injustice because it's so easy for a student to just type something and then send it without thinking about the consequence of pressing send. And it does not, in social media, a text, a post does not really reflect the true emotion of the individual.
Absolutely.
And so that's been my major concern. So first thing we teach them is how to engage in effective communication and how to build relationships. That's what it's about, building these relationships, these lasting relationships that will, I believe, help us be the type of school that we truly meant to be. We always talk about Titan pride. We talk about that positive attitude, respect, responsibility, integrity, determination, excellence, and now we even have some additional things we've added. But I think that the key is effective communication and building relationships. If we teach students those two core principles, I think that we will see a change in our culture.
Absolutely, yeah. You were talking a lot about teaching students how to resolve conflict and doing that I think is really important from a young age, just as we teach students to read and write from a young age, especially now with social media being introduced to students so young. I think that that's really important to be able to teach them not to make rash decisions as we all, or you guys are doing. So I think that's very important as well.
So, Mr. Baldwin, you said that, well, and from David too, I picked up at the fact that community circles are after suspension in terms of fighting. Is there a reason why that is?
Okay, so restorative conferences are.
Conferences, yes.
Right, so what happens is if a fight occurs, let's say for instance, a fight occurs right now, you have individuals who are right here at this point, they're not ready to resolve the issue, they're not ready to talk, and depending upon the magnitude of the issue, because again, suspension is always a last resort. You know, we don't just immediately go to suspension, but if the fight has been so egregious that it does result in suspension, we're not going to be able to have an effective restorative circle with emotions so high. So what happens is that after suspension, when they come back, when they've had an opportunity to think about what happened and they've calmed down, then we're able to have a productive conversation, because at that point, the consequences have already been given. So we're not talking about additional consequences. We're talking about looking at it, being reflective. You know, what happened? Who did it impact? What could you have done differently? And what will you do differently in the future to ensure that this does not happen again? So we always want to make sure that although there's been a consequence, you still have to come back and address the issue. You know, just suspending someone and never going back to the issue, the root cause, like, you know, what happened? You know, what could you have done differently? You know, even with the suspension, it should be a learning experience.
Absolutely. You were talking a lot about the high emotions after fighting, and the emotions are definitely high between the students that are engaged in the fight, but the emotions are also high with the students surrounding. For our next discussion, let's talk a little about the reactions from students, and we can watch a video about that as well.
What do you usually do when a fight starts?
I'm just like, yo, someone's fighting, and then I just like watch it.
I guess I usually just stand there and I guess I'll watch it.
Break it up first. You call to let everyone know what's going on, and then you try to break it up.
Probably just watch. I don't really like get up and run around, like that's extra.
I sometimes go and watch, sometimes I go and I take my phone out and record it, but the majority of the times I'm watching it.
I usually don't do anything.
I walk away.
I run to it, you know, stay
Pull
at
your
a
phone
certain
out.
distance.
I be looking, but
I run if it's far away. I always catch it.
I go in the crowd and record it.
I watch it, yeah.
Break through the crowd and record it.
I sort of just stand there and watch it. I don't really try and get in the middle of it.
What do your friends usually do?
Same thing as me. We just crowd over the fight and just see what's going on, you know.
Hang out, watch it.
They also watch. Some of them might record.
They do the same thing. They take their phones out, they go up, see who's fighting and things like that.
My friends usually go and try to videotape the fight.
Pull their phones out, videotape, you know.
They right with me, you know,
Right.
on my side. Look, right
Cameras up, YouTube, Snapchat.
My friends usually record it like him.
Tell me it's not worth it. Just back up and go to class.
They're with me, just standing there watching it.
Well, thank you. I think that's really important to know that students, I mean, obviously students are watching and they're wanting to see the conflict, because that's a human nature, is to be able to see that conflict and see that drama. What are some of the administration's first tactics and approaches when a fight breaks out? What are the first steps?
Well, when a fight first breaks out, we're hopefully in proximity of it. We physically get involved ourselves to try to break students up from fighting the best that we can. I think that it really depends. When students start circling around a fight, it becomes a potential hazard, because the administration or security officers have a problem breaking through that crowd. It delays them, and students can get really injured. We've seen fights where there have been injuries. Students have sustained injuries, and had we had students either try to get break up a fight or also clear a path so that administration and security officers could get in right away. I prefer, rather than students running towards a fight, for them to run toward and let somebody know that that's happening. Now, I know in today's society and social media, people kind of whip out their phones and record stuff, no matter where it's happening. Traffic accident, 2 people fighting on the street, people fighting in school. But what it does is it really kind of exacerbates one instance to make it look like that's what represents our school.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of ugly.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And there is such a focus on social media and such a focus on popularity and fame in our society, and especially among high schoolers, that there is such a desire to get that popularity, and the way to do that is by posting something on social media because everyone will see it. And if it's a fight, that's going to be something that quickly draws people's attention, and they can get their peers' attention very quickly, and they can get likes and they can get shares, and those numbers are so important to our students and to so many people today, that's really important. What is the protocol, I guess, to being able to resolve these social media fights and recording the fights on social media? I know that currently there's not a set policy, but do we have plans for the policy, or maybe how can we encourage students from not doing that?
I think when students start recording fights and are creating a barrier for the adults to come in and help solve the situation, it does, what those students are doing is contributing to hazardous environment. And I'd love to have some discussion with policymakers in ACPS to discuss what do we do about that when students are recording those fights. Now on the flip side, with that, we have used a lot of the students' recordings and social media to find out exactly what happened. And we normally learn more from what we see on Snapchat and what we see on students wherever they post these videos, and we're able to actually identify a whole lot more of either what caused it, or if there were any other combatants, or if anybody even around the circle of students did anything to contribute to the fight.
Yeah, and while having that social media, the fights on social media does really enhance that fight culture and encourage that fight culture, having those videos is very helpful for proof as well. You had said that you came to a conference to discuss some of the solutions. Do you have any possible solutions on the social media fights as well?
The social media fights, I think once a student pulls out their phone and records, I think they are a conflict of that solution too. So I think some repercussions should come to a student that's pulling their phone out. Of course, you're not going to get all of everybody that pulls their phone out, but if you just get a few of them, then I think that will solve some of the problem of what happened according to the fights.
Yeah, absolutely. And that does become a tricky barrier as well, because you don't know what students to punish and how far the punishment should go.
Mr. Baldwin, how do you think fighting affects the climate of the school?
Well, it has a negative impact, and I've tied back into, what Mr. Ballard says earlier. It affects the overall safety of the school, students and staff included. In my 25 years with Alexander City Public Schools, and 24 of it being at T.C. Williams High School, I've seen individuals seriously injured, and I'm talking about bystanders, just not the individuals actually that were part of the fight. And I do want to share with those who are engaged in these physical altercations, you're basically providing free entertainment. That's what you're doing. You're providing free entertainment for your peers. And you have to ask yourself at what cost, because if you end up being suspended or if you end up being charged, there's a cost there. And it has not only a negative impact upon the school climate, school culture, but upon that individual personally. So again, we do not condone fighting, and it does negatively impact our overall school climate and culture.
Yeah, and I think also the social media, having those fights on social media really does encourage fighting, because it praises it, gives the videos likes, and that only encourages fighting and encourages that conflict and a negative resolution to that conflict. Now we'd like to introduce Miss Ria Butler. She is a teacher that has joined us to our discussion.
How are you doing, sorry?
No worries. Miss Butler, what would you say, earlier we were talking about some of the causes to fighting, and now we're discussing some of the effects and solutions as well. What would you say some of the main causes are that you've seen either in the classroom or in the halls, or just some students that you've talked to of fighting?
I think it depends on who's fighting. A lot of it could be social media, things that stem from something that's happened, maybe in a classroom that kids take home, and then it becomes part of that conversation through social media, and then it brings itself back at school. I think it's small, tiny, little issues that I think are not always resolved in the best manner. And I think, we have high school students, and not everybody knows how to handle that in an effective way. And I think that's one of the reasons why we wanted to bring the restorative practices in.
Absolutely.
To kind of figure out how can we get to the bottom of it, and then kind of go from there. I also think a lot of students come to school angry. And I think it stems from maybe things that we can't necessarily control all the time. And I think it's for us to be able to get to the root of that, I think. But there's other things that need to be put in place that I think is bigger than us at times. There's a lot of little pieces to it. But then also I think sometimes it's a trend. I think it's some kids want to have status and make a statement. It could be also students that do not like being in the classroom, and there's some issues with academic achievement.
Yeah.
And they're saying, I'd rather be in the hallway than be in the classroom right now. Frustration, maybe I think there's a lot of underlying issues when it comes to anger with students, and it's trying to pinpoint that is very difficult on the teacher's behalf, administration, and so I think it's one of those things that, as I look in the past couple of years, I think it's become more prevalent because of social media.
Yeah,
there's a different way for kids to be able to have a conversation with each other without being in front of each other. And then it kind of just, my biggest issue with it is that the danger that's involved in it. I think sometimes as students we forget that bystanders trying to intervene is just unsafe. And I can talk about countless stories in the news where we've had people get really hurt and sometimes fatal. And I think we don't want to get to that point. And so I'm glad you guys are doing this panel because it is a serious issue. As far as I think you asked about some solutions.
Yes.
I think this is, for starters, is a good thing. To kind of talk about those who aren't fighting, how do they feel about it?
Yeah.
What do they see that's going on? What's the kind of conversations that kids have about the culture of the school? Sometimes adults talk, but I think we need to talk more to the students to kind of figure out what's really going on.
Yeah.
And like I said, that's, I think, where the restorative justice comes into practice, but also those repeat offenders. What is this stemming from?
Yeah.
And trying to get to the real root of what's really happening. And I also think, too, there may be more input from teachers as well. About how they feel about some of the relationships that are built within the classroom between student to student. I think a lot of times we talk about teacher to student, but I think there's a lot of student-to-student relationships that may not be built, and maybe we're not doing the best job to be able to build those things. So Oh my gosh, there's so much more to say. But I hope I don't know.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying all that. That's very helpful to know. And I think a lot of what we're seeing is that it comes down to like the root causes among students, that there are a lot of causes, and that it's kind of hard to control those, but really all we can do is encourage a happy and safe feeling environment at school and in the classroom, and trying to keep students in the classroom, not more with punishment, as we're not doing, but with that encouragement in the restorative circles and in the community circle as well. And trying to build those relationships, I think, is really important. Also, I think we're seeing a lot of encouragement from students, from the recording and from that video we heard. A lot of students are just running to go watch because it's entertaining and it's encouraged, and that only encourages it more, and that enhances that desire to fight. But at the same time, we have seen, as from David's case, that it can be learned and taught that fighting isn't an adequate resolution. And to do our next, to start our next discussion or continue this discussion, we're going to watch a video about the trends in social media with fighting, because that's something that is obviously a big problem.
Do you typically discuss fights with your friends? If so, what are the conversations like?
It's like, yo, did you see the fight? Oh, some da-da-da-da-da did this da-da-da-da-da. Like, wow.
I guess sometimes people will talk about like who won the fight and like what really happened.
Yeah, and I basically just ask who won the fight.
Not really, only if it's between people we know, then we discuss it and we just ask who won, who was involved, and things like that.
We don't go into deep discussion. They will be like, oh, did you hear about this fight? But that's as far as it will go.
Like, who won? Who's Mayweather?
Yes, and the conversations are mostly like, dang, he got whooped.
Yeah, and we just make fun of the person who lost the fight or who got physically beaten up.
Yes, we do discuss it. We say, did you see that fight? Do you know if there's a video? Who was involved and why?
Have you ever recorded a fight on your cell phone?
No, I have not.
Do you know students who have done this?
No, I don't.
What do you think of this?
Recording the fight on the cell phone? Well, people want to see it later on. People want to show it to someone else. So I'm just like, okay, well, I mean, it's not my fight. But I don't think it's a big deal to record it on someone's phone.
I don't know. It's not that big of a deal, I don't think.
Do you know students who have done this?
Many.
What do you think of this?
I think it's more for publicity that they do it, to post it on their social media accounts so that they can get likes, retweets, things like that.
I mean, it's not really nothing. Like, they just record it for the snap.
I don't think it's okay, but you know.
I never personally recorded a fight, but I know people who have. And I think that the video should be deleted because it's not really people's business, I say.
In your mind, what does the uploading a fight say about TC as a school?
It just shows how TC has a negative side to it sometimes. But, you know, all high schools have fights, and it's just a way of high school, I guess.
We shouldn't use social media as a vehicle to, show more violence. And I think it only perpetuates the whatever aggression, whatever conflict was there beforehand. So I don't think it does anything to squash the beef. I think all it does is perpetuate it and continue it.
It say that we got some petty students.
It represents us really badly, and it just shows the type of school that we are, which doesn't represent us in a good way.
Honestly, it's pretty bad. It's a pretty bad look for TC. I don't think it says a lot about our integrity or anything like that.
Okay, thank you for that video. How do you think social media and the whole recording of fights have affected the fight culture overall in the school? To anyone.
It impacted the school a lot. I mean, as if we put a student with a 4.0 on social media that currently go to TC, it would get less retweets than a fight that only been on social media for 10 minutes. I mean, if we see the big problem as fighting and put it on social media, but the fight does not reflect big upon TC. I think it just basically reflects on what's going on at home with the two people that's fighting or whoever is fighting. It reflects on what's going on. I don't think it reflects on TC as a big impact.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that like the current like TV shows and a lot of the current trends are ones that encourage fighting and encourage violence. I mean, we laugh at a TV show when someone falls down the stairs or if someone hits someone on the back or something. I mean, and it's very casual, but and we know that that's for entertainment. But at the same time, that students take that very close to heart and will replicate that whether they realize that's what they're doing or not. And since social media is a form of entertainment, that is, again, fighting being on there will associate with entertainment. And then watching fighting is entertainment, so then fighting is entertainment. And it, again, just encourages the fight culture at the school. And it definitely doesn't, like you were saying, have a positive impact on the school's reputation.
I think posting videos of fights really is detrimental to the school. It takes a lot of effort and consistency to create a school culture, especially one as large and as diverse and as complex as T.C. Williams. And when you have a fight between, let's say, two or more students, it really is a very dramatic event that reverberates through the school. And that's what people talk about, not what Calvin brought up. You're not talking about the wonderful television studio and our students who are doing all these advances, our Theogony students. We're talking about that fight, and that's getting posted and shared and retweeted, and it becomes part of the reputation that we have. What that video doesn't show are the other 3,900 students not fighting and doing what they're supposed to do. And so that's a really hard thing to combat when you do work so hard to try to develop a school culture around positivity and relationships and solution-oriented type of approaches. That one event can derail you for some time, and you have to try to get it back.
Absolutely, and I hear things from students at other schools that'll talk about, the fights at TC, and I personally, I don't think that really reflects us as a school, because I hear that and I'm like, wait, what? Are there that many fights? And it's not that there are, but the ones that are there are posted. And I think, yes, there are fights, but there are also, the TV studio and the choir and the 4.0 students. And that's what I think of when I think of TC. And having that fight culture is just negating that, and it's not fair that it's taking over those positive things as well. David, what would you say, do you think that students that are involved in fights, do you think that they're seeking or they like having the video on social media, or do you think that it's maybe something that's a little more embarrassing and personal?
Like you guys said, for the likes and the retweets and all the other stuff. Because the way I see how our students work, it's all about popularity.
Yeah.
Who gets the most likes, who gets the most retweets, the most shares, and all that other stuff. Me, for myself, I don't really go on social media because it's boring. I see nothing fun of it. But when I go on they say Instagram, I go on my Explorer, I see all these other fights, All Stars, all the other silly stuff. But like I said, it's all about that retweets and likes a person gets.
Absolutely. Ms. Butler, how do you think that social media impacts fights?
I'm just listening to everybody. I think it's a cultural thing. I think in the sense of this generation of students, we now have students who are born with just cell phones, social, like that is what it is. And I think it is, I don't think it's a TC issue per se. I think it's a issue in general because it is emulated in all these different, I mean, oh my gosh, so many things. I could go on now and see different fights and buses and all these things that are discussed about other schools, but it does put a negative outlook on our school. I think the bigger issue is how much longer are people going to video until actually something really deadly happens?
Yeah.
How much will you videotape? Will you videotape if there's blood?
Yeah.
Will you videotape if someone passes out? When it becomes more of an issue when someone's actually hurt, and that makes me nervous. And it's something very difficult to control when you're at a school of 4,000 students.
Yeah.
It becomes bigger than just the two people fighting. And so the social media, it's very hard to combat because of it is a trend, it is something that kids do. And it's hard to put things into place to say, if you videotape, that would be like suspending like at least 20 plus students.
Yeah.
But I think it's trendy. Unfortunately, it's a trendy thing, and until something really bad happens, it will no longer be a trend. Specifically, maybe here, but I've heard of stories. So it's almost to the point where we really have to educate students on a larger scale to explain to them what really is happening within that incident.
And for anyone to answer as our last question, what do you think that we can do moving forward about discouraging the fight culture and the social media fights and recording those fights on social media?
Well, I think, one of the first things we have to acknowledge is that this whole issue with conflict and social media is bigger than just T.C. Williams High School. I mean, if you look at it from a geopolitical perspective, we have world leaders that are engaging in conflict back and forth using social media. And, as adults, it's important that we model what appropriate behavior looks like. When we talk about climate, we're talking about the quality, we're talking about the character of the school. We're talking about that culture piece, but the climate deals with institutional beliefs. So we have to decide as a school that we're going to have a culture at T.C. Williams that does not support fighting. And when fights occur and students run toward these fights and they start recording these fights on the school on their phone, what they're saying basically is that they condone this behavior. And I think we have to work collaboratively. The administration, when a fight happens, unfortunately, at that point, the role that they're serving is reactive. But we need to be proactive, and I think that starts right here. What you all are doing now, having that open discussion and dialogue about, first of all, acknowledging that yes, we want a school that is presented in a positive light. When I Google T.C. Williams High School, I want to hear about the $600,000 that has been donated to the Scholarship Fund of Alexandria. I don't want to look at T.C. Williams on the next World Star video. I'm a graduate of T.C. Williams High School, and I really take it personally when I see our school portrayed in negative light. So to answer your question again, it starts with each and every one of us. We have to decide. We have to make up in our minds that, listen, we don't condone fighting. We're not going to run to your fights. We're not going to record your fights. And last but not least, students who fight in school really don't want to fight because someone's going to break it up. And so first thing we need to let them know is we're no longer going to provide an audience. If you're going to entertain, you're going to entertain yourself, but you're not going to entertain me.
Absolutely. Do you have anything to say?
I think what the point that was just made, I think that's a good point. I think it's based on audience, who's around. I basically most times before a person fight, they're gonna tell someone who is basically a hype man, and that hype man is gonna go tell other people, and that other people is gonna be surrounding the person that's gonna be fighting. So I think it's based on the audience. If people that's in TC stop providing that audience, then the fight rate will tremendously go down.
Absolutely.
You know, I think also part of the solution around, you know, and one of the principles of restorative practices has to do with, you know, the relationship building. I mean, it's key principle of that, and we have to make sure as the adults in the building too that we know and understand all of the, as much as we can, about students and the complexities of their world outside of school, what is happening in their homes, their neighborhoods, and what is it that they deal with on the daily that may come in and bleed into school, and have those discussions with them.
Yeah. So like you guys said about the audience and stuff like that. I've been in fights before, and I really don't care who's behind me, who's watching, because the person who's is gonna face the consequences. The person who's gonna get all these hits is the person who's fighting, not the audience. So in my opinion, I really don't care who's watching my fight, who's seeing the fight, because the one who faced they're not gonna be the ones suspended all at home. They're the ones that are in school. So that's my opinion.
Absolutely.
I think too, we have to have a zero. I agree with Mr. Ball. You got to be zero tolerance with everybody that's involved there, and it has to be those courageous conversations. And I agree with you as far as most kids don't want to fight, and kids that do want to do real harm, they don't come to school. And so, I feel like we really need to kind of get to the, like we said, the root of why students are involved. And there are some students who are involved that are afraid. They may not say it, but it's a continuous thing that goes on when they go home, and therefore, you know, we have 2.5, 2.8, 3.0 students that are amazing, you know. Yeah. And I think it takes away from that group that is doing really well, because we assume that it's always just this cluster of kids that are terrible. We have some wonderful students here. Absolutely. And I think they've just been put in some situations that are difficult to get out of when you have 10 plus watching you get into an altercation. And sometimes you get forced into it because you have to react. You're by yourself. And so I agree with you. Like, we have to, the adults have to be definitely more zero tolerance and kind of think of, even maybe reach out and look at some of the other schools and what are they doing that look like our school, our demographics, the size, to find out what are some of the things that they're putting in place, programs.
Absolutely.
So that we can emulate the same.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, again, thank you to all of the whole panel, and then thank you to TV production for letting Theogony have this talk with everyone about fighting. And again, I'm Paul Holtz.
I'm Katherine Connor.
And this will be available on YouTube at TCTV, Theogony Online, which is tctheogony.com, and on Channel 17 soon. That's all we have. Goodbye.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.